I was standing in my sister's living room, balloons pressed to the ceiling, pastel confetti crunching under my shoes, when the world tilted. She smiled like she'd won something. She placed the ultrasound photo into my hands, warm from her fingers, and said softly, proudly, "Isn't she beautiful?" My heart didn't race. It stopped, because I knew that picture. I knew the curve of that tiny spine. I knew the date printed in the corner. I knew the timing. And I knew before anyone popped a balloon or cut the cake that the baby my sister was celebrating was connected to me in a way no one in that room could imagine. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the photo. I didn't run. I smiled. I hugged her. I stood there while the pink smoke filled the room and everyone cheered, and something inside me broke so quietly that no one noticed. That's the strange thing about betrayal. It doesn't always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it slips in wearing your sister's happiness. A few days before that party, I had been scrolling late at night, the glow of my phone lighting up a dark room that felt too quiet. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one. People were telling their stories about trusting family, about lines crossed, about moments when the truth arrived too late to stop the damage. I remember thinking, I can't imagine something like that happening to me. Life has a cruel sense of humor. Let me take you back. My sister and I were close in the way only siblings can be, built on shared childhood secrets, late-night whispers, and the unspoken rule that no matter what happened, we would protect each other. She was the louder one, the risk-taker, the one who laughed first and apologized later. I was the planner, the listener, the one who smoothed things over. We balanced each other, or at least I thought we did. When I met my partner, let's call him Daniel, she was the first person I told. She teased me about the way my voice changed when I said his name. She asked for photos. She asked questions. Too many questions, maybe, but I brushed that off. She's my sister, I told myself. She's just curious. Daniel fit into my life easily. He was charming in that effortless way that makes people feel seen. He remembered details. He listened. He made promises sound reasonable. We talked about the future in soft, careful sentences, like we were afraid to scare it away. I trusted him. I trusted him the way you trust someone when you believe your life is finally settling into place. Family dinners became a routine. Laughter, food, stories retold until they became legends. My sisters sat across from Daniel more often than not. They joked. They shared looks I didn't understand at the time. I noticed, but I didn't question. Trust has a way of blinding you while convincing you its vision. Then came the changes. Small at first. Daniel working late. Messages answered with delays. My sister canceling plans with me, then posting photos from nights out I hadn't been invited to. I felt a tug of uncomfort, like a loose thread on a sweater. I ignored it. We're taught to doubt ourselves before we doubt the people we love. The first real crack appeared on a rainy Thursday. I had Daniel's phone in my hand, not because I was snooping, but because mine had died and I needed to call my mom. A notification lit up the screen, a name I knew too well, my sister. I didn't open it. I handed the phone back. I laughed at myself for even feeling uneasy. But that night, sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed moments I had dismissed, the inside jokes, the private smiles, the way conversations stopped when I entered the room. When I finally confronted Daniel, he didn't get angry. He got calm, too calm. He told me I was imagining things. He told me I was stressed. He told me my sister was family, and how could I even think something like that? Gaslighting doesn't shout. It whispers until you start questioning your own reflection. I apologized to him, to myself. Weeks passed, then months. Life moved forward, even as something inside me kept tugging, kept warning. And then one afternoon, my sister called with an excitement that buzzed through the line. She was pregnant. I remember sitting down hard, the air knocked out of my lungs. She talked fast, doctor's appointments, cravings, how unexpected it was. I congratulated her. I meant it, or at least I tried to. I asked about the father. There was a pause, a laugh. She said it was complicated. She said she'd explain later. Later never came. The invitation to the gender reveal arrived wrapped in glitter and joy. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself families don't do this to each other. I told myself to show up, smile, and celebrate. So there I was, holding the ultrasound, hearing the word she, watching my sister glow while the room erupted in cheers. And in that exact moment, when the applause was loud enough to cover the truth, I noticed the date on the photo. It matched the night Daniel told me he was working late, the night my sister canceled our plans, the night everything changed. I looked up. Daniel wasn't there. My sister's eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. For a split second, her smile faltered, and that's when I realized the party wasn't the reveal. I was. I excused myself to the bathroom with the ultrasound still trembling in my hands. I locked the door and leaned against it, the noise of celebration muffled into a dull roar. I stared at the image again, hoping, praying I had misread it. Dates can be wrong. Timelines can blur. Coincidences happen. I counted backward anyway. Once, twice, a third time, slower, like if I took enough care the math would change. It didn't. I pressed my palm to my mouth to keep from making a sound. In the mirror, my face looked unfamiliar, too pale, eyes too sharp, like something feral had woken up behind them. I splashed water, took deep breaths, told myself I could survive one afternoon, just one, get through the cake, the hugs, the photos, then go home and fall apart in private. When I walked back out, my sister intercepted me with a grin and an arm around my shoulders. "Isn't it perfect?" she said, nodding at the decorations. I wanted everything soft, gentle. Gentle. The words scraped. I asked, as lightly as I could, "So, have you decided on names?" She hesitated, just a beat. "A few," she said. "Daniel likes—" She stopped herself, laughed it off. "I mean, I like—" My ears rang. The room tilted again. "Daniel likes." I watched her for the rest of the party the way you watch a storm line form on the horizon. She moved with confidence, soaking up attention, accepting congratulations like gifts she'd always known were coming. And every so often her eyes searched the room, instinctively, anxiously, like she was waiting for someone who wasn't there. He didn't come. Daniel didn't show up. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark replaying conversations, texts, moments that it felt off but harmless at the time. I opened old photos, zoomed in on backgrounds, timestamps, reflections. I scrolled through messages between my sister and me, noticing gaps where there shouldn't have been any. I opened Daniel's contact and hovered over it, my thumb heavy with everything unsaid. By morning, denial had burned off, leaving something sharper underneath. I drove to my sister's place unannounced. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I rehearsed a dozen versions of the conversation, soft, angry, careful, explosive. None of them felt right. When she opened the door, she looked surprised, then guarded, then relieved, all in the span of a second. "You okay?" she asked, stepping aside to let me in. Her apartment smelled like citrus cleaner and something sweet, candles maybe. A baby book sat open on the coffee table. I sat down slowly, afraid my legs might give out. "I need you to be honest with me," I said. She didn't answer right away. She busied herself straightening a pillow that didn't need it. "About what?" "About the baby. About Daniel." Silence stretched, the kind that presses on your ears. Finally, she sighed. "I didn't want you to find out like this." The room went very quiet. Even my heartbeat seemed to pause, like it was listening. It wasn't planned completely. It just happened. One night, we were both vulnerable. You were going through a lot. He said you two were having problems. I laughed. It came out wrong, short and hollow. "We weren't." She looked away. "That's not what he told me." There it was, the wedge, the story he'd fed her, polished and believable, the version where I was distant, unstable, the reason he strayed. I felt anger rise, hot and fast, but beneath it was something worse, grief. For the sister I thought I had, for the partner I trusted, for the life I was already mourning. "How long?" I asked. She swallowed. "Months." Months. While I was planning weekends, while I was talking about the future, while I was apologizing for doubts I should have listened to. "Does he know you're pregnant?" I asked. "Yes, of course he does." My chest tightened. "And he's okay with this?" She nodded. "He wants to be involved." The word involved echoed like a threat. I stood up. My vision blurred at the edges. "So what now?" I asked. "What am I supposed to do with this?" She reached for me. I stepped back. "I'm still your sister," she said softly. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That was the moment something hardened inside me, because intent doesn't erase impact, love doesn't excuse betrayal, and family doesn't get a free pass to break you. I left without another word. Daniel called that evening, then again, then again. I didn't answer. When I finally did, days later, he sounded relieved, like he'd been holding his breath. "I can explain," he said. "Go ahead," I replied. My voice didn't sound like mine. He told me it was a mistake, that he was confused, that my sister came on to him, that he loved me, that he wanted to fix things. He said all the right words, stacked carefully like a wall meant to keep the truth out. I listened. Then I asked one question. "Did you tell her we were breaking up?" He hesitated. "I told her we were struggling." The half-truth, the favorite tool of cowards. "I need space," I said. "Don't contact me." He didn't respect that. He showed up at my door a week later, eyes red, voice low. He said he was choosing me. He said he'd talk to my sister, set boundaries, do the right thing. He said the baby didn't change how he felt. That's when I understood how little he understood. I told him to leave. Word spread quickly through the family. Sides were taken in whispers and group chats I wasn't part of. Some people told me to forgive, for the sake of peace, for the sake of the baby. Others avoided me altogether, like betrayal was contagious. My sister sent messages I didn't answer, apologies mixed with justifications, regret tangled with expectation. She wanted forgiveness without consequences. Weeks turned into months. I rebuilt my routines. I went quiet online for a while, then slowly started sharing again, carefully, honestly. That's when the comments started pouring in. Stories like mine, worse than mine. People thanking me for saying what they couldn't. It helped. It hurt. It reminded me I wasn't alone. Then one afternoon, I got a message that stopped me cold. From Daniel. "We need to talk. There's something you don't know." My stomach dropped, because if there was one thing I'd learned by then, it was this. Every time he said that, my life changed. And I had a terrible feeling, this time, would be no different. I stared at Daniel's message for a long time before opening it again. Like if I delayed long enough, the words might rearrange themselves into something harmless. There's something you don't know. That sentence had haunted me before. It was the sentence that always came right before damage. I didn't reply right away. I made tea I didn't drink. I paced my apartment, the floorboards memorizing the pattern of my anxiety. I told myself I was stronger now, that I'd already survived the worst of it, but my body didn't believe me. My hand shook, my chest felt tight, and my mind ran ahead, inventing possibilities I didn't want to name. Finally, I typed, "Say it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Can we meet?" I almost said no. I should have said no. But curiosity mixed with dread has a powerful pull. I agreed to meet in a public place, a cafe near the river, all glass windows and neutral territory. I arrived early and chose a table where I could see the door. When Daniel walked in, he looked thinner, tired, the kind of tired that tries to pass as regret. He spotted me and hesitated, like he wasn't sure he was welcome in the same space as me. He sat down anyway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "How's your sister?" he asked softly. I laughed before I could stop myself. "You don't get to ask that." He nodded. "Fair." He wrapped his hands around his coffee like he needed the warmth. "I messed up," he said. "I know that. But there's more to it, and you deserve the truth." The word truth felt heavy, dangerous. "Then tell it," I said. He took a breath. "She told me she was on birth control." The sentence landed, sharp and sudden. I felt anger spike, immediate and hot, not just at her, but at him for trying to shift blame like it could lighten the weight of what he'd done. "That's what you wanted to tell me?" I said. "That's your big revelation?" "There's more," he said quickly. "She stopped taking it on purpose." I froze. The cafe noise faded into a low hum. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She wanted to get pregnant," he said. "She told me later. She said she was afraid I'd leave, that if there was a baby, everything would be real." Real, as if my life had been imaginary. I leaned back, my mind racing. This didn't absolve him. It didn't erase months of lies, but it changed the shape of the betrayal. It meant intention, planning, a decision made without my knowledge, without my consent. "And you stayed after you knew?" He looked down. Yes. That answer told me everything. I left the cafe without finishing my tea, the taste of it suddenly bitter. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. I walked along the river until my legs burned, trying to outrun the thoughts colliding in my head. My sister had always been impulsive, but this was calculated, a line crossed not in a moment of weakness, but in pursuit of something she wanted. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall, replaying childhood memories like evidence in a trial I never wanted to hold. Shared rooms, shared clothes, promises whispered under blankets. When had she started seeing me as competition instead of family? I decided I needed to hear it from her. When I knocked on her door a few days later, she didn't look surprised, just tired, older somehow. The glow from the pregnancy announcement photos hadn't followed her home. "Did you do it on purpose?" I asked before she could say a word. Her face collapsed. That was answer enough, but she nodded anyway. "I didn't plan for you to find out like this. I didn't plan it to hurt you." "But you planned the baby," I said. Tears filled her eyes. "I was scared. He kept talking about you, about how perfect your life was. I felt invisible." "Invisible?" My voice shook. "So you decided to destroy mine." "That's not fair," she said weakly. "Neither is this." She tried to explain loneliness, jealousy, fear of being left behind. She talked about how pregnancy made her feel chosen, needed, secure. Every word landed like salt in an open wound. "You took something that wasn't yours to take," I said quietly. "My trust, my relationship, my sense of safety." She reached for my hand. I pulled away. "I'm still carrying your niece or nephew. Doesn't that matter?" It did, and that was the cruelest part. The baby was innocent, untouched by the mess that created her. Loving her would mean staying connected to the people who broke me. Not loving her would mean losing something I hadn't even had the chance to know. "I don't know how to exist in this family anymore," I said. My sister sobbed. I felt nothing, emptiness where closeness used to live. When I left, I didn't promise to stay in touch. I didn't promise forgiveness. I promised nothing because promises had lost their meaning. Months passed. The pregnancy progressed. Baby photos appeared in group chats I muted. Names were suggested, nurseries painted. Life marched on, indifferent to my grief. On my channel, I finally told the story, not with names, not with accusations, but with honesty. I talked about betrayal that comes from the people closest to you, about how family can fracture you in ways strangers never could. The response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in, people thanking me, people crying with me, people saying, "This happened to me too." That's when my sister reached out again. She wanted me at the birth. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Being there would mean standing beside her in the moment her new life began, while mine still felt like it was in pieces. Before I could decide, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I almost ignored it. Almost. "What?" I said. "I need to warn you," he said, his voice tight. "About what?" My grip tightened on the phone. "About what she plans to do next." The line went dead. And suddenly, the past didn't feel finished at all. It felt like it was winding up for one final devastating turn. Daniel's words echoed long after the call ended. "She's not telling you everything. What she plans to do next." I stood there with my phone pressed to my ear, listening to silence like it might explain itself. My first instinct was anger, at him for inserting himself back into my life, at her for still being a mystery I couldn't escape. My second instinct was fear, because secrets in my family had a way of detonating when you least expected them. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, and tried to think like someone who hadn't been emotionally wrecked by the same two people. What could she possibly plan now? A move? A reconciliation attempt? A demand? My mind ran through worst-case scenarios like a broken carousel. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice was overly gentle, the way it gets when she's already decided something and wants me to agree without resistance. "Your sister's doing well," she said. "The doctor says everything looks healthy." "That's good," I replied. It was the truth. I wanted the baby to be healthy. I just didn't want to be collateral damage. There was a pause. "She asked about you." "Of course she did." "She's scared," my mom continued. "She doesn't want to do this without her sister." The word sister landed awkwardly, like a title I hadn't agreed to carry anymore. "I don't know what she expects from me," I said carefully. "She expects compassion and forgiveness." There it was, the unspoken family rule, finally spoken aloud. Be the bigger person, swallow the hurt, smooth it over, make it easier for everyone else. "I'm tired of being the bigger person," I said. My mother sighed, heavy and disappointed. "She's pregnant." "And I'm broken," I said. "Why does that matter less?" The call ended shortly after, unresolved. That became a theme. A week later, I received an invitation, formal, printed, mailed to my door. A baby shower. My sister's handwriting curled across the envelope, familiar and painful. Inside, a note in the same ink. I know things are complicated, but I want you there. I need you there. Need. Not want. Need. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on work, on my channel, on the quiet community that had formed around shared pain and shared survival. People sent me long messages, screenshots of text, voice notes, family ultimatums. I wasn't alone, but that didn't make the decisions easier. Then Daniel showed up again. This time he didn't call, he emailed. "She's planning to move," the subject line read. My pulse jumped. I opened it. He wrote that my sister had been talking about starting over, a new city, a clean slate, somewhere far enough that the past couldn't follow, somewhere she could raise the baby without judgment or reminders. And she wanted me to come with her. I laughed out loud, the sound sharp and disbelieving. Of course she did. In her version of reality, I was a supporting character, someone who would eventually step back into place once enough time had passed. The email ended with one line that made my blood run cold. "She's telling people you and I are finished because you couldn't handle the situation." I stared at the screen. That familiar story again, the one where I was unstable, difficult, the reason everything fell apart. I realized then that this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about control, about narrative, about who got to tell the story of what happened. I drove to my parents' house that evening uninvited and unannounced. My sister was there, sitting on the couch with her hands resting on her stomach, glowing in that way that made everyone treat her like fragile glass. She looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across her face. "We need to talk," I said. My parents exchanged looks and quietly excused themselves, retreating to the kitchen like this was a storm they'd rather not stand in. "What is it?" she asked. "Are you moving?" I said. Her eyes widened, just slightly. "Who told you that?" "So you are," I said. She nodded. "I thought it might be best, a fresh start." "For who?" I asked. "For the baby," she said quickly. "For all of us." "All of us," I repeated. "You mean me too?" She hesitated. That was answer enough. "I never said I was going with you," I said. "I know, but I hoped you would eventually." There it was again, that assumption that time would soften everything, that pain had an expiration date. "And you're telling people I couldn't handle it?" I asked. She looked away. "People ask questions." "So you gave them an easy answer, at my expense." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean it like that." "You never do, but somehow it always ends the same." She stood up slowly, one hand braced against the couch. "I can't change the past, but I can give this baby a better future." "And what does that make me?" I asked quietly. "A footnote?" She didn't respond. I realized then that no matter what I did, stayed, left, forgave, didn't forgive, I would always be inconvenient to her story. My pain didn't fit neatly into the picture she wanted to paint. "I'm not moving, and I'm not pretending this didn't happen." Her shoulders slumped. "So that's it?" "For now," I replied. As I turned to leave, she said something that stopped me cold. "He's not out of our lives." I turned back. "What?" "Daniel," she said. "He's going to be involved, whether you like it or not." My stomach dropped. "You said you wanted a fresh start." "I do, but he's the father." The words echoed, final and immovable. I walked out without another word, my hands numb, my thoughts racing. On the drive home, my phone buzzed, a notification from my channel. A new comment. "My sister did this to me too, but wait until you hear what she did after the baby was born." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, because suddenly I wasn't just afraid of what my sister had done. I was afraid of what she was still capable of doing. That comment stayed with me longer than it should have. Wait until you hear what she did after the baby was born. I clicked on the profile, scrolling through their posts, their pain spilling out in fragments, restraining orders, custody battles, family gaslighting so deep it warped reality. I closed the app and sat very still. I didn't want to believe my sister could go further than she already had. But once trust is broken, your mind stops protecting people for you. I started noticing things I had ignored before. My sister posting vague captions online about toxic people and choosing peace, relatives liking them, commenting hearts, support that felt pointed like a finger aimed in my direction, group chats buzzing with updates I hadn't asked for, doctor visits, nursery progress, name polls, each one a reminder that life was moving forward without me, and somehow also about me. Then the call came. It was my aunt, voice hushed like she was sharing gossip instead of a warning. "I didn't want you to hear this from someone else," she said, "but your sister's been saying some things." My chest tightened. "What kind of things?" "That you were emotionally unstable after the breakup," she said carefully. "That she's worried about how you'll react when the baby arrives." The room tilted. Worried how? "She says she doesn't feel safe letting you be alone with the baby." The words knocked the air out of me. "That's not true. That's insane." "I know," my aunt replied quickly. "That's why I'm calling. But she's planting seeds." Seeds. That was the word Daniel had used once, back when we were still pretending everything was normal. "You have to plant the story early," he'd said about work politics, "so when things happen, people already believe it." I hung up and stared at the wall, my thoughts snapping into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just about distance or hurt feelings anymore. This was about reputation, about positioning, about making sure that when lines were drawn, I'd already been pushed to the wrong side of them. I messaged my sister. "We need to talk now." She replied an hour later. "I'm resting. The doctor says stress isn't good for the baby." Always the shield, always untouchable. I drove to her place anyway. She opened the door slowly, one hand on her stomach, brows knit in concern. "I told you I needed rest." "I heard what you've been telling people," I said. Her expression tightened. "People talk." "Don't do that," I said. "Don't minimize this." She sighed, like I was exhausting. "I'm just being honest about how things have been." "How things have been according to who?" I asked. "You?" She folded her arms defensively. "You disappeared. You cut me off. You refused to support me during my pregnancy. I was betrayed by you." "And I apologized," she snapped. "What more do you want?" The question hit me harder than any insult, because it told me she truly didn't understand or didn't care to. "I want you to stop rewriting what happened," I said. "I want you to stop painting me as unstable to make yourself look better." She looked past me, toward the window, toward a version of the world where this conversation didn't exist. "I need people to trust me," she said quietly. "I need them to trust that I'm protecting my child." "And you think tearing me down is how you do that?" I asked. She didn't answer. That silence was a choice. I stepped back. "If you keep doing this," I said, "I won't stay quiet." Her eyes snapped to mine. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you," I said. "I have messages, emails, dates. I have the truth." She laughed then, soft, incredulous. "Who do you think they'll believe, a pregnant woman or the sister who walked away?" The cruelty of it stunned me, not because it was shocking, but because it was strategic. She knew exactly what she was doing. I left shaking, my hands numb on the steering wheel. I called a friend and told her everything, start to finish, out loud for the first time. Hearing it spoken made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "You need to protect yourself," she said. "Document everything." So I did. I saved messages, screenshotted posts, wrote timelines.
I didn't want to use them, but I refused to be unarmed. The baby arrived early on a quiet Tuesday morning. I found out through social media like everyone else. Pink blanket, tiny fingers, a caption about miracles and fresh starts. I cried, not because I wasn't included, but because, despite everything, part of me still loved her, still loved the idea of us. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Your sister wants to talk. She wants to meet the baby." My heart raced. This was it, the moment I'd been bracing for without realizing it. I agreed to meet at the hospital, surrounded by witnesses, safety in numbers. When I walked into the room, my sister looked smaller, fragile. The baby slept in her arms, impossibly tiny, her chest rising and falling like a promise. "She's beautiful," I whispered. My sister smiled, relief washing over her face. "I knew you'd come." I stepped closer, my heart splitting open. The baby stirred, fingers curling instinctively. I reached out, then stopped. "There's something we need to clear up," I said quietly. Her smile faded. "This isn't the time." "It is, before things go any further." She shifted the baby protectively. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I won't be part of this if you keep telling people I'm a danger. I won't be your villain." Her jaw tightened. "I'm just being cautious." "About what? Me?" She didn't deny it. That's when the nurse knocked and stepped in, clipboard in hand. "I'm sorry," she said, glancing between us, "but there's been a note added to the chart. Only approved visitors are allowed alone with the baby." I felt my blood run cold. "What note?" The nurse hesitated. "It says there are family concerns." I looked at my sister. She wouldn't meet my eyes. In that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't over. It was only changing shape. And whatever she'd planned next, it had already begun.
I didn't argue with the nurse. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't do anything that could be twisted later and used against me. I simply nodded, stepped back, and let the distance settle where it had clearly been prepared for me. My sister adjusted the baby in her arms, rocking gently, eyes fixed on her daughter like I wasn't even there anymore. That hurt more than the note, more than the lie, because it was a rehearsal, a quiet preview of how easily I could be erased. "I should go," I said. She didn't stop me. The hallway outside the maternity ward felt too bright, too normal for what had just happened. Nurses laughed at the desk. A couple walked past holding balloons, life continuing at full volume while mine rang hollow. I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote everything down. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just facts. Dates, screenshots, conversations, the ultrasound date, the messages from Daniel, the comments my sister had made to relatives, the hospital note. I saved everything in multiple places, cloud, USB, email drafts to myself. Because something had shifted. This was no longer just personal betrayal. This was risk. The next few weeks were quiet on the surface and deeply unsettling underneath. I noticed family members pulling back. Invitations stopped. Conversations shortened. When I did speak to relatives, there was a new tone in their voices. Careful, measured, like they were afraid of saying the wrong thing around me, around her. I overheard things through secondhand comments. "She's just worried. You know how protective new mothers can be. She's doing what's best for the baby." No one asked me what was best for me. Then came the message that finally confirmed what I'd been sensing all along. It was from my cousin, someone neutral, someone not usually involved in drama. "I don't know how to say this without upsetting you," she wrote, "but your sister told people she's considering limiting contact until you get help." I stared at the screen. Get help? The phrase was vague enough to mean anything and dangerous enough to mean everything. I called her immediately. "She says you're struggling mentally," my cousin said carefully, "that the breakup really affected you, that she's scared you're not coping."
I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Did she say that before or after she slept with my partner? Silence. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to pay attention. That was the moment I realized something crucial. She wasn't just rewriting the past, she was preparing the future, and if I didn't intervene, I'd eventually be cast as unstable, unsafe, unreliable, while she stood safely wrapped in the armor of motherhood. Daniel tried to contact me again. I ignored him. Whatever role he'd played before didn't matter anymore. This was between my sister and me, and the story she was trying to sell. So I did something I never thought I'd have to do with my own family. I consulted a lawyer. Not to sue, not to threaten, just to understand. The lawyer listened quietly as I laid it all out. When I finished, she folded her hands and said something that made my stomach drop. "You're right to document everything," she said, "because once someone starts questioning your mental stability in connection to a child, it can escalate very quickly." Escalate how? I asked. She could file for a protective boundary or claim you're a risk, even informally, and once that narrative exists, it's very hard to undo. I felt cold all over. Even if it's not true? Especially if it's not true, she replied. Truth often moves slower than fear. I walked out of that office feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. The betrayal had evolved. It was no longer emotional. It was strategic. A week later, my sister invited the family over for a small gathering. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it. Daniel was there. That detail spread quietly but deliberately. The message was clear. He's still here. She's not. That night, I finally broke my silence. I posted a video. Not naming names, not attacking, just telling my story in full for the first time, from trust to betrayal to gaslighting to being quietly labeled a problem instead of a person. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for sympathy. I told the truth. The response was immediate and explosive. Comments flooded in. Support poured out. People recognized the pattern. Therapists, social workers, survivors of family scapegoating. Words like parental alienation, narrative abuse, character assassination appeared again and again. And then someone shared it. Within 24 hours, people in my real life had seen it. My phone rang. My mother. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Because I'm being erased," I said, "and I won't disappear quietly." "You're making her look bad," she said. "She just had a baby." "I made her look bad," I replied. "I just stopped lying for her." My mother cried. She said I was tearing the family apart, that I should have kept it private, that I was hurting everyone. I listened. Then I said the hardest thing I've ever said to her. "I was already hurt," I said. "You just didn't see it because I wasn't the one holding a baby." The call ended badly. The next day, I received an email from a legal office. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a formal request. My sister was asking me to refrain from discussing her child, or any family matters publicly, claiming it caused her distress and raised concerns about safety. Safety. The word stared back at me like a loaded weapon. This was it, the thing Daniel had tried to warn me about. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was coming from my voice. And the worst part? She truly believed she was the victim. I closed my laptop slowly, my mind racing, not with fear this time, but clarity, because now I understood something vital. If I stayed quiet, I would lose everything. If I spoke, I would start a war I never asked for. And the next move, mine or hers, would decide who controlled the truth forever.
I read the email 3 times, slowly, carefully, like if I missed a word, it might change the meaning. A formal request to refrain, concerns about safety, distress caused by public statements. It was written in polite legal language, but underneath, it was a threat, a warning shot. Not strong enough to silence me yet, but loud enough to make me hesitate. And for the first time since this began, I felt real fear. Not panic, not heartbreak, fear. Because this wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about power, about who would be believed when things escalated, about who looked reasonable and who looked dangerous. I forwarded the email to the lawyer. Her reply came fast. Do not respond emotionally, do not delete anything, and do not post until we talk. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying every interaction, every word I'd ever said to my sister. I imagined worst-case futures, restraining orders, family cutoffs, whispered warnings passed down like fact. Be careful around her. She's unstable. She's not safe. That story had already started circulating. I could feel it. The next morning, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She rang the bell again and again until I answered. Her face was pale, eyes sharp with worry and frustration. "What are you doing?" she demanded, stepping inside like she still had the right. "I'm protecting myself," I said. "You're humiliating your sister," she shot back. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "Yes," I replied quietly, "I do, because they've been saying it about me for months." She shook her head. "She's overwhelmed. She's postpartum. She's scared." "And what am I?" I asked. "Disposable?" "That's not fair," she snapped. "Neither is this," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "She slept with my partner. She lied. She manipulated the story. And now she's questioning my mental health to keep control." My mother's expression wavered. For a moment, just a moment, I thought she saw it, the pattern, the truth. Then she said, "Why can't you just let it go?" That was the moment something broke cleanly inside me. Because if I let it go, I lose myself. She left angry, hurt, unconvinced. And I knew then that this war wouldn't just cost me my sister. It would cost me my family. 2 days later, the escalation came. I received a call from a social worker. She introduced herself calmly, professionally. She said there had been a concern raised about family dynamics and emotional well-being. I felt my blood run cold. "It's just to ask you a few questions," she said gently. "There's no accusation here." But there was. I could hear it in the structure of her questions. Was I under stress? Had I experienced emotional distress recently? How did I feel about my sister's baby? I answered honestly, but carefully. I stuck to facts, to calm language, to documented events. At the end, she paused. "Thank you for your cooperation. This helps clarify things." After the call ended, I sat there shaking. This was no longer theoretical. My sister had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I called the lawyer immediately. "She's escalating through third parties," I said. "What do I do?" "You stay calm and you go on record." So we did. We drafted a formal response, measured, factual, firm. It outlined the timeline, the betrayal, the documented gaslighting, the hospital incident, the pattern of character framing. No insults, no emotion, just truth. It was sent, and then silence. Days passed. No reply, no calls, no new messages. Until one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was my sister. Her voice was different, tight, controlled, furious beneath the surface. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "You did this," I replied. "You're trying to ruin my life," she hissed. "No," I said calmly.
I'm refusing to let you ruin mine." She laughed bitterly. "You think people believe you?" "I know they do," I said, "because they've lived it too." She went quiet. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "If you keep pushing, you won't see my daughter again." The threat landed hard. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, something in me had settled. "I won't be blackmailed," I said. "Not by you, not by anyone." "She's my child," she snapped. "And I'm your sister, or I was." The line went dead. That night, I made a decision that terrified me, but also freed me. I recorded another video. This time, I didn't just tell my story. I explained the pattern. How betrayal turns into narrative control, how accountability gets reframed as cruelty, how silence is demanded in the name of peace while harm continues unchecked. I spoke slowly, calmly, clearly, and at the end, I said one sentence that changed everything. If telling the truth makes me the villain, then the lie was protecting someone else all along. I posted it. Within hours, it exploded. People shared it, discussed it, sent it to friends, tagged professionals. Validation poured in, not just emotional, but credible. And then something unexpected happened. A message came in from someone I didn't know, but they knew my sister. And they wrote, "I believe you, and you're not the only one she's done this to." My hands trembled as I read the rest, because suddenly the story was bigger than me, bigger than my family, bigger than betrayal. And I realized the climax hadn't passed yet. It was just beginning. I read that message over and over, my hands cold, my chest tight. You're not the only one she's done this to. For so long, I have been standing alone in the center of this story, bracing myself against a storm that felt personal, targeted. But suddenly, the wind shifted. This wasn't just about me. It never had been. I replied cautiously, "What do you mean?" The response came a few minutes later, longer, heavier. They told me about a friendship that ended quietly years ago, about secrets shared in confidence that later reappeared as gossip, about boundaries ignored, then rewritten, about being framed as unstable when they tried to speak up. Different details, same pattern. I sat back, the room spinning gently, like my mind was rearranging itself around a new truth. This wasn't chaos, it was a system. Over the next few days, more messages arrived, some short, some painfully detailed. People I never met describing the same emotional fingerprints: charm followed by entitlement, closeness followed by control, vulnerability used as leverage. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't exaggerating, and I wasn't alone. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it grounded me. It gave shape to what it felt like fog. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. She read it all. "This helps," she said, "not because you're trying to expose her, but because it establishes pattern." Pattern. The word felt solid, protective. And then, just as quietly as the storm had escalated, it began to recede. The social worker followed up once more, thanked me for my cooperation, and closed the inquiry. No further action, no concerns noted, no risk identified. That chapter ended with a whimper, not a bang. My sister didn't reach out again. Not with anger, not with threats, not even with silence disguised as concern. Just absence. Family gatherings happened without me, then slowly without her. The tension she'd carried into every room lingered after she left, like a scent no one wanted to acknowledge. People began to notice, to connect dots, to ask quieter questions.
No one apologized outright, but sometimes that's as close to accountability as you get. Months passed. I stopped waiting for the next escalation, stopped flinching when my phone rang, stopped rehearsing explanations for things I hadn't done. I rebuilt my life in smaller, steadier ways. I learned how to sit with grief without turning it inward. I learned how to tell the truth without sharpening it into a weapon. I learned that boundaries don't need to be loud to be real. And I learned something else, something harder. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from clarity. I still think about my niece. I imagine her first laugh, her first steps. I wonder whose eyes she'll have. I hope, fiercely, that she grows up in a world where love doesn't come with conditions and truth doesn't require permission. I may never be part of her life, and that loss still hurts, but I've stopped letting it define me. Because here's the truth no one tells you when betrayal comes from family. You don't heal by being understood by the people who hurt you. You heal by understanding yourself well enough to walk away. I used to think silence was strength, that endurance was love, that keeping the peace was the same as being kind. I was wrong. Silence can be surrender. Endurance can become self-betrayal, and peace that requires you to disappear is not peace at all. So, if you're listening to this and something in your chest feels tight, if this story feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not dramatic for remembering. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not broken because someone else rewrote the story. People who rely on silence fear one thing more than exposure: consistency. Truth told calmly, repeated steadily, anchored in facts. That's what ended this. Not revenge, not shouting, not destruction, just refusing to disappear. I don't know what my sister tells people now. I don't need to. The truth has a strange way of surviving without your supervision. And as for me, I'm still here, still speaking, still choosing myself, still standing in the aftermath, whole, even with the scars. If there's a moral to all of this, it's simple and it's hard. Love should never cost you your reality, and anyone who asks you to give that up, no matter who they are, has already crossed a line. This was my story of betrayal, and if you stayed until the end, thank you for listening, for witnessing, for proving that truth doesn't need permission to exist. Sometimes being brave isn't about fighting back. Sometimes it's walking away with your voice intact.